communication between diverse learning machines. What application requires computers to talk? Well, there's a lot of things. Like our cell phones communicate, computers communicate over the internet, and there's GPS, radios, all this different stuff. But what about intelligent machines? What's the application they need to communicate in like a very intellectual way that's not just very structured and rigid? Something that's dynamic and where robots of different kinds talk to each other in a dynamic way. It's very hard to think of a situation where this is required and cannot be done in a more obtainable way. There's nothing I could think of requires dynamic and super intelligent communication like us humans use that cannot, with software, because of the nature of software, be done in a much easier way without needing to develop a humanistic, dynamic form of communication. You just have them all follow a protocol that you built custom, or they don't communicate at all because they've trained and they've grown up together from day one, and they can predict each other's behaviors exactly. Maybe this easy way isn't the right way. Maybe we shouldn't be just training a bunch of these identical copy robots at the same time that are exactly the same and communicating over very strict protocols that don't change or not communicating at all. What's going to happen, I believe, tribalization and monopolization of smart things. It's going to happen. One of the huge reasons people jumped on the iPhone train was iMessage. They could talk to each other easily. It was a very clean interface. Had like emojis and stuff, very rich text format. They could also communicate from their laptops. And Android users, you would show up as like this creature from the dark or something, and the message would be broken, and you wouldn't get some messages. And it was horrible. I'm not going to say it was the only thing that made iPhone successful. It certainly wasn't. But it's something to consider. These platforms loved exclusive games. You could only play the game if you use it on their platform. Even though consumers hate this and they want to backlash against this kind of anti-competitive behavior in companies, we still want the products. What's going on here? See this? If I want to put an HDMI into it or USB, I got to have a dongle. And there's a lot of people that argue that the only reason Apple did this was to sell more dongles. Now, I kind of disagree with that, but it certainly is still a market incentive. And neutrality is a big one. This was recently dissolved, as we all know. Suppression of information, throttling, all sorts of different new business models in internet, having to pay for certain websites. Now, all these things have had something in common. Restricting and controlling information. You might ask, this isn't necessarily in that category, but it is. This is genetic information. The transfer of genetic information is being controlled. So we know that our market loves monopolization and tribalization. So what does this mean for smart stuff, AI? What does this mean? How might the future look where all of our smart stuff is monopolized or tribalized? You might not be able to even have a smart home unless you buy every single piece the same brand. Now, you might have heard of Nest, a very big smart home startup that has grown in popularity. They're actually trying to fight this with an open-sourced communication protocol. Now, arguably, all their devices are still extremely stupid and not smart at all. And so their rigid, classical protocol of communication between devices of different brands works. It works. But what happens when these things get smarter? Look at us humans. We struggle with communicating with each other. So what makes us think we can program computers to do it? And a company wants to automate their call center. They want to automate their transactions. They want to automate their customer service. They want to automate their HR department, their management. Well, what happens when none of those departments can communicate at all unless you buy Google? And also you can have things where, like, Apple just will force its bots to not communicate with Google's strictly. Like, they might actually go in there and say, do not talk to these bots. That's okay. This is fine. This is good. It really enhances the colors. This is the logo of DeepMind. They're known for doing a lot of insane research, but mostly in video games. Why? You have no ethics problems, and you can speed up time. Their next biggest project is this card game. They've done things like Go, which is this mind-blowing Japanese board game. They've actually conquered StarCraft. Now they're going to a card game? What the hell? Well, it's because they think this card game, unlike all other games that they've been successful with, requires theory of mind. That is something that computers really struggle with. It's sort of understanding that they are different than others and how they think, not necessarily how they behave, but how they think. Richard Sutton recently posted an article. Richard Sutton is a very, very famous Canadian researcher. He's sort of a pioneer of reinforcement learning. He argues that we should not be handcrafting algorithms. We should be trying to make them as generic as possible, not trying to make them think like us. Just trying to make a generic algorithm and then throw it at, $1 million worth of cloud computing. And so the best algorithms are the ones that suck at the beginning, but with computation they scale the best, and you get greater results, and have very little domain knowledge hand-coded into them, which is exactly what we need if we are going to get dynamic and diverse learning machines. And I propose, one of my ideas, which I'm sure many people have thought of it, but I never actually looked it up, introduce multiple algorithms into an environment. Each agent should not be running the same model, the same code. So all those circles, they're all running the same code, but with just different experience. I think we should even go further and put in different algorithms, maybe written by different people, written by different companies, within the same environment, see what happens. I think that's sort of taking diversity to the next level.